Working inside a submarine is often described as one of the most psychologically demanding jobs in the military. You're locked in a metal tube, hundreds of feet underwater for months at a time, breathing recycled air and pretending powdered eggs aren't, well, powdered eggs. Yet submarines have evolved from crude diving bells that killed more of their own crews than enemy sailors into the most sophisticated weapons platforms ever built. On October 12, 1900, the U.S. Navy commissioned its first submarine, USS Holland. And let's be honest, calling it a submarine was generous. It was more like a barely controllable underwater coffin that happened to have a torpedo tube. The thing was about 54 feet long, had a crew of 7 brave men, and could stay submerged for about as long as you can hold your breath. After climbing a few flights of stairs, the Holland was powered by a gasoline engine on the surface. Yes, gasoline. Because apparently someone thought, you know what this cramped metal tube needs? Highly flammable vapor. When submerged, it switched to electric motors powered by batteries that had the lifespan of a smartphone from 2010. Interestingly, the Navy initially rejected Holland's design because they thought submarines were un-American and violated the gentlemanly rules of naval warfare. They preferred their battles visible and honorable, not conducted by what one admiral called those damned underwater pirates. John Philip Holland had spent decades trying to convince navies that underwater warfare was the future. The problem was that his early submarines had a disturbing tendency to sink permanently rather than temporarily. It was like trying to sell someone an airplane that could turn into a Honda Accord sometime after takeoff. By World War I, American submarines had evolved from experimental death traps to slightly less experimental death traps. The real turning point in undersea warfare didn't come from American ingenuity. It came from watching German U-boats treat the Atlantic like their personal hunting ground. In 1918, the German sub U-156 popped up off Cape Cod and casually shelled some tugboats and barges, lobbing a few shells onto a beach in what's now remembered as the Attack on Orleans. Contrary to popular myth, the crew didn't ask local fishermen for directions or Yelp reviews of Boston Harbor. They just showed up uninvited and started the fireworks. It was the only time during the war that the U.S. mainland took direct fire, and Cape Cod handled it with classic New England stoicism. Probably annoyed, but not surprised. Between the wars, the Navy developed the fleet submarine concept. Bigger boats that could operate with the surface fleet instead of just lurking near harbors like maritime muggers. The Gato and Balao classes became the workhorses of World War II submarine warfare, carrying crews of around 80 men who somehow managed to live together without killing each other. Well, mostly. Submarine crews during this era developed their own currency system using cigarettes, coffee, and pornographic magazines. The exchange rate was surprisingly stable. One Playboy equaled roughly 47 cigarettes or 3 pounds of coffee. The Navy officially ignored this underground economy because, frankly, they had bigger problems. World War II was when American submarines stopped being experimental curiosities and became the stuff of nightmares for enemy shipping. U.S. submarines sank more Japanese merchant vessels than all other weapons combined. The USS Tang holds the record for most enemy ships sunk by a single American submarine, 33 vessels. Ironically, Tang was sunk by its own torpedo that ran in a circle and hit the submarine. Commander Richard O'Kane, who survived the sinking, later said it was the most perfectly circular torpedo run I've ever seen. He received the Medal of Honor for his service, presumably not for the torpedo that sank his own boat. Submarine crews developed their own culture, a mix of technical expertise, dark humor, and the kind of camaraderie that only comes from knowing you're all in the same potential tomb together. They called their boats boats instead of ships, because as one submariner explained, ships don't sink on purpose. Then came USS Nautilus in 1954, and everything changed overnight. The man behind this revolution was Admiral Hyman Rickover, who was either a brilliant visionary or a magnificent, obsessive-compulsive, depending on who you asked. Here's the thing about Rickover. He personally interviewed every single person who worked on nuclear submarines for over 30 years. His interviews were legendary for their psychological intensity. He once made a candidate sit in a chair with shortened front legs, so they'd slide toward his desk throughout the interview. Another time, he locked someone in a broom closet for 3 hours to test their patience. The man was thorough. Nuclear submarines didn't just change submarine warfare, they made it possible. The Nautilus could travel 60,000 miles without refueling. It was like discovering fire. Except fire that could also launch nuclear missiles and had its own psychiatrist. The Cold War fundamentally changed submarine warfare by creating two distinct subspecies: ballistic missile submarines, affectionately called boomers, and fast attack submarines, basically strategic nuclear deterrent versus underwater assassin. The boomers were designed for one job: hide in the ocean with enough nuclear firepower to end civilization, and hope nobody ever asked them to use it. The USS George Washington, launched in 1959, became the first American ballistic missile submarine, carrying 16 Polaris missiles. Each missile could level a city, and the submarine could launch all of them while submerged. It was like having a portable apocalypse that you could park anywhere in the world's oceans. Meanwhile, fast attack submarines were designed to hunt Soviet submarines and surface ships. These boats were built for speed, stealth, and the ability to get close enough to enemy vessels to ruin their entire day. The Los Angeles class dominated this role through the 1980s and 90s, with 62 boats that could hunt enemy submarines, attack surface ships, and launch Tomahawk cruise missiles at land targets. Here's the Cold War's bizarre submarine psychology. Boomer crews spent months underwater essentially playing the world's most boring video game. Stay hidden, stay quiet, and pray the phone never rings. Fast attack crews, meanwhile, spent their time playing underwater hide-and-seek with Soviet submarines, occasionally surfacing to take periscope photos of Russian naval bases, just to prove they'd been there. The Ohio-class boomers represented the pinnacle of strategic deterrence. Each submarine carries more individual nuclear warheads than most countries possess in their entire arsenals. Enough firepower to individually target every Starbucks in Manhattan and still have warheads left over for the suburbs. These boats use a two-crew system because humans weren't designed to live underwater for 6 months, while babysitting civilization-ending weapons. The Virginia-class submarines represent a fundamental shift in construction philosophy. Earlier submarines were built by assembling the hull and then installing equipment through tiny hatches. This required construction workers to essentially perform surgery inside a steel tube. Virginia-class boats use modular construction, building complete sections and welding them together like submarine-sized Lego blocks that cost more than most countries' defense budgets. Modern submarines are marvels of acoustic engineering. Everything is designed for silence. Even the coffee makers are engineered to operate quietly. Because nothing ruins a stealth mission like a noisy espresso machine, alerting enemy sonar to your caffeine addiction. Here's how quiet modern submarines are. The Virginia class is quieter while running than Los Angeles class submarines were while sitting still. They're so quiet that marine biologists have had to recalibrate their equipment because whales are louder than nuclear submarines. The Columbia class represents the most expensive military project in U.S. history, $132 billion for 12 submarines. That's $11 billion per boat, or roughly the GDP of Mongolia per submarine. These submarines are designed to operate for 42 years without refueling, meaning the reactor cores installed today will still be generating power when today's submarine recruits are collecting Social Security. The next evolution is already beginning: autonomous underwater vehicles. The Navy's Orca Extra-Large Unmanned Undersea Vehicle is basically a robot submarine that can operate independently for months. It's 51 feet long, weighs 50 tons, and can carry the same payload as a manned submarine torpedo room. Here's where it gets interesting. The Navy is developing wolf pack tactics, using multiple unmanned submarines controlled by a single manned vessel. What could possibly go wrong? The technology exists to build fully autonomous submarines today that could hunt enemy vessels without human intervention. The question isn't whether we can do it. It's whether we should program machines to make kill decisions while we're busy trying to figure out why our smart toasters keep burning the bread. Throughout this evolution, the most significant change hasn't been nuclear propulsion or stealth technology. It's been the gradual realization that submarines exist in their own domain, fighting a three-dimensional chess game where silence is survival and patience is a weapon. Modern submarine crews aren't just sailors who happen to work underwater. They're specialists in a form of warfare that requires both incredible technical expertise and the psychological ability to remain sane while sealed in a metal tube for months at a time. They're simultaneously guardians of civilization-ending weapons and maintenance technicians for ice cream machines. The submarines being designed today will still be patrolling the oceans in 2075, operated by technologies we haven't invented yet, and crewed by people who voluntarily choose to live in metal tubes because, apparently, the key to global security is ensuring our underwater apocalypse machines are operated by people with just the right combination of technical expertise and mild claustrophobia. From the barely functional Holland to the apocalyptic Columbia class, American submarines have evolved into the most sophisticated weapons platforms ever built. And the most important lesson? The future of naval warfare belongs to those brave enough to go down to the sea in ships that are specifically designed to sink. Just hopefully not permanently. This is Steel Mallard. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy this type of defense-related content. Until next time, keep your periscope up and your sonar quiet.